Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Mobile devices such as smartphones and tablets are today's Swiss Army knives. We use them as cameras, maps, credit cards, watches, fitness trackers, messengers, and many more. And sometimes we even use them to make phone calls. All of these new functionalities are no doubt convenient and useful, but we also allow our mobile devices to collect a lot of personal, financial, and location-based data about ourselves. Your device is also an extension of your identity, so that's important. People in your network trust messages that they receive from you. If a cyber criminal gets access to that information, the results could be disastrous. Securing your devices can help prevent that from happening. Given the recent increase in cyber threat activity related to the war in Ukraine, many people, especially volunteers who are not very tech savvy, become an easy target for cyber criminals. So we, the representatives of the Ukrainian Canadian community in all over Canada, we have people from Ottawa, from Winnipeg, from Toronto, want to show you how to protect your mobile devices from many types of cyber attacks, so you guys are more secure. Unfortunately, there is no silver bullet that can help prevent all attack vectors, but if you follow our advice, you'll be in a much better place to protect yourself, your data, and people who trust you. So this presentation will be in English, however, we have 4 volunteers monitoring the chat and the Q&A section of Zoom, and that's the only 2 options available for you to ask your questions, by the way. And so we will be able to answer questions not just in English, but in Ukrainian and Russian. So please use whatever language is convenient for you to ask your questions. My colleague and I will also try to answer as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. And just so you know, we are recording this webinar and we will post it on YouTube for broader access. So we have 4 sections today that we want to cover. So the first one is about device protection. As I mentioned before, we focus on mobile devices such as smartphones and tablets. If there is a demand for other devices such as laptops and desktops, we will cover them as well, but not today. So device protection. There is more to it, but in the interest of time, I will only focus on the 4 security recommendations here in this section. First one, let me just quickly go through those 4 recommendations. First one is going to be about official updates that you receive on your iOS and Android devices. The second one is about rebooting your devices, preferably at least once a day. Then we'll talk about some unnecessary apps and how to remove them and why to remove them, actually. And then the last but not least is going to be about the dangers of rooting your mobile device and how you should only use authorized application repositories for your apps. So first one is very simple. You all have mobile devices, smartphones, and tablets, and periodically, once every month, maybe more often, you get notifications from your iOS and Android phones that there are new software updates available. So software updates are like oil changes and tune-ups for your phone or tablets. They keep things running smoothly. They also help improve the user interface, add new features, and of course, fix security vulnerabilities. So that's number 1 reason why you should install those updates as soon as they become available. So we recommend updating the software whenever there is a new version to make sure that your device stays up to date. Do you know how many security updates there were over the past 12 months for iOS, for Apple iPhones? 17. Basically, more often than every month, there are new updates that fix security bugs. So take it very seriously. On this slide, you can see how to install official updates for iOS devices. So when you see the icon with settings with the red dot, quite often it indicates you that there is a new update available. So you just go to settings, you go to general, and then you click on software update. Same instruction for Android devices. Second recommendation is to regularly reboot all of your devices. So once cyber criminals gain access to your mobile devices, yes, it happens to the best of us, they look for ways to persist on your operating system by installing malicious software. Basically, what happens is that if malware infects your mobile device, it's kept in the memory of your phone or tablet. But it's become more and more difficult because device manufacturers such as Apple and Google become even more stringent with security. It's more and more difficult for malware to get access to core operating system, right? So cyber criminals quite often use phone's memory to infect you. So that's why, like I said, that's why cyber criminals use in-memory payloads. It's a piece of malware that sits in the device memory to infect your mobile device. Such hacks can survive a reboot, but often don't need to, since many people rarely turn phones off. So bottom line, if you reboot your phone, it will erase the memory of your phone, like temporary memory, and it'll kick the malware off. Next is remove all unnecessary applications from your mobile device. This one is pretty simple. Just do an inventory of all the applications that you have on your mobile device and see what you don't use. I'm sure there are some applications which haven't been open for a long time, and there is no need to keep them. So why do we care about this? Because with each application that you have on your mobile device, there is a higher chance that you can be vulnerable, because as you can imagine, each application is developed separately, and there might be security bugs and holes in those applications. So if you have 20 of those apps, then potentially you have 20 vulnerabilities. If you have 50 of those apps, potentially you have 50 vulnerabilities. So it's just simple math. Again, do the inventory of your apps and remove those ones that are not used by you. And then the last but not least, as I said, don't root your phone. So what that means is it's also called jailbreaking. It's not as popular as it used to be because for unless you are a developer of Android and iOS, you don't really need that. But what happens is that anything that is not basically rooting device is so what happened when you root this device? You give access to your applications to the system, to the very core of your mobile device. And if your mobile device is not rooted, each application is kept in a safe place called sandbox. But when you root your phone, then those sandboxes break. And if you have a malware or malicious application on your phone, that application can access to the system and all the data that you keep on your phone. So it's never a good idea to root your device. So don't do that. Don't do that. And then also only use authorized application repositories for your apps. Anything that is not accredited by the Google App Store or Apple App Store isn't necessarily infected with malicious bugs. But I would strongly recommend that you only use the accredited sites when downloading apps. Like I mentioned before, it's Apple App Store and Google Play for Android. Why? The answer is very simple, because Apple and Google have robust security checks and balances. They check each application which is submitted to an app store for security vulnerabilities, and basically you just you just trust those apps more. If you download something on the site, then there is a high potential it might be vulnerable. All right, phishing.
All right, I'm Dimian Haivaron. Hi, I'm based in Winnipeg. So phishing, if you could go to the next slide. Phishing is just a type of social engineering attack. It's basically manipulating end users to make mistakes, and specifically security mistakes. So it's typically involves creating a sense of urgency, creating some kind of dilemma, creating something that needs to be dealt with right away to make people trip up and do something that they shouldn't. One of the most common ones are email phishing scams. So you'll get a fake FedEx shipment. You'll get email from Revenue Canada saying you need to do something right away. There's often, click here to get something free. The offer expires in 1 hour. And also, another way of doing things is scareware, where you'll go onto a website and you'll get a pop-up that you're infected and you have to do something right away and call a number and pay them money to fix it. So these are all types of social engineering attacks. If you can go to the next slide. So here are examples of malicious emails. You can see here in the email address at the top, Amazon Canada is misspelt. It's a genericized greeting. If you hover over links, what the screen says and where the link actually goes are different. We're constantly getting bombarded with these malicious emails. Clicking on the link can expose you to a virus, disclosure of information, or even login credentials. You'll see on the subsequent slide an example, but you'll sometimes click on something and it asks you for your Facebook login or your LinkedIn login. It's actually not Facebook or LinkedIn. They're just trying to trick you by having, if you go to the next slide, here's another example, generic greeting. They're telling you to download a document. The document has a password. These are total red flags of a malicious attack. Next slide, please. So here's what I was just talking about. You'll go to a site, and even if you click the link, it'll ask you to log into Facebook. This looks like a valid login on the phone, but you can see at the very top, it's not facebook.com, it's another site. What they're doing is they're harvesting your credentials so they can log into an account and attack all your friends. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see here an example of a message that could be sent to multiple people, your entire contact, and they get that and they trust it because it's actually coming from your account. We'll talk about it later, but two-factor authentication is the best protection. Obviously, not clicking it is a good idea too. If you can go to the next slide. Here's an example of, you can go to a website and there's a pop-up on this website saying, computers are infected, call this number. The tech support will be very helpful for you. They'll either want to take your credit card so they can fix your problem, or they'll say, oh, please install some software so we can remote and fix it. They might pretend to be Microsoft or another trusted vendor, but this is something that is like a textbook scam. Next screen, please. Here's some other examples. You'll get text messages, for your security, click here. It's time to change your password. Now, some of these social media providers do send things, but, typically these are all scams. The best way to check it is, you can read the URLs. Obviously, in these examples here, this is not the Royal Bank. You can see here it's a .gg, and Royal Bank's in the name. This is not a Royal Bank account. The best way is, if you believe the Royal Bank or others are trying to contact you, close the message, go to a web page, type in the address that you know that they have, and don't click on links that people send you unless you're absolutely sure it's a valid link because you were expecting it. Someone phoned you and told you they're sending you a link. These are all targeted attacks. Next screen, please. Now, here's another example. You can get a message, from Facebook. You can get a message from Microsoft saying your account is locked. Please click here to unlock your account. On the computer, it's sometimes a little easier because you can hover over links. Now that the dominant, phones are so dominant for internet usage, it's sometimes tricky on phones because they don't have hover effects, and obviously there's no mouse. So you have to be very careful. Sometimes if you hold the link down, it'll show you the link. But these are all huge red flags. Look at the email. It comes from offlinecollege.com, but it's talking about stanford.edu accounts. You have to stop and read these messages. We very quickly, especially now with all that's going on in Ukraine, you'll get a message that talks about Stand with Ukraine or something to do with fundraising. You just have to be very careful because there's a lot of malicious bad actors out there trying to take advantage, and also institutionalized attacks from Russian-based groups to try to get access to accounts and to siphon money. If you can go to the next slide. Now, here's another example. Sense of urgency, do this right away. These are all red flags. Next one. So if you're not 100% sure, don't click links. If it's important, the person will contact you again. They'll phone you. What things you can do is contact the sender. So don't reply to the email. Call them or send an email that you have on file that is correct. Text them, but use a different mechanism to contact them from the message that you're suspicious about. Hover over the link. Is the link the same as the place it's actually going? Are there misspelled words? Amazon, is Amazon all capitalized and the O is actually a 0? Does it say AmazonSecurity.com? Is it variations that isn't actually that vendor? Is this an expected email? If you get an email saying something happens and you need to log in again, that's not normal. It's not normal to get an email that tells you to log into something. Normally you get an email, you log in when you go on a new device or you log out. You have to ask yourself, why is this site asking me for a password or a password for a different site? You have to be hyper vigilant. We're all under attack right now. We're getting these messages. I know, again, whether I'm paranoid or not, I know in the last week I've gotten an increase of messages. I get phone calls that, Revenue Canada's terminating my social insurance number and I have to call them back right away. Obviously I don't, but this is everywhere right now. And if you think you might have been hacked, immediately change your passwords. Next slide, please. So this will be talked about a little more in the social media, but don't open suspicious files if you're not completely trusting the sender. This applies to group chats. Don't click messages that you get in text. If you need to open files, like I've said, call the person, do a voice chat, send them a text message, whatever you need to do, but verify that they actually meant to send you that and it's a valid attachment. Next slide. This will be covered a little more in the next section, but you have to be very wary who you accept as friends. Don't trust that the person is who they say they are unless you know. There's some tools that you can use to try to spot which are fake accounts. And this is a great thing. There's actually something called a Facebook privacy checkup. If you're logged into your Facebook account, there's a little wizard that goes through and they make recommendations. Maybe you have things that are too public. Maybe you should keep some information private. It'll push you towards, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, two-factor authentication. It's a must-have. I'll talk about it a little later, but it's very important to secure your accounts. Next slide. Perfect.
All right, so let's talk about securing your social media. So there's 4 things we're going to be talking about. First is about accepting friend requests and messages from anyone. Then we'll talk about some questionable social media and those social media that, for those social media that you need to use, how to secure it. And then we'll talk about passwords for different social media and the multi-factor authentication, as Damian mentioned before. So first, don't accept friend and message requests from anyone until you verify the identity of that person. So there is an old saying, don't talk to strangers. It holds true in the digital world too. While we are all being friendly, make sure you know the person before you accept their friend request. Accepting friend requests from strangers can increase the risk of cyber criminals impersonating you, collecting personal information to gain access to online accounts. It's even more important now during the war in Ukraine because malicious trolls and cyber criminals are trying to gather information on our community to launch targeted attacks. So how do you do that? It's simple. Use audio or video. If someone sent you a friend request, just, if you can find out like a phone number of that person, just call them and verify, is it you? Or it's even more simple for a message request. Or if someone sends you a link with something, just call that person and say, hey, did you just send it to me? You can also ask for selfie. That's also pretty good. Next one is be careful with some social media. So I included 3 messengers here. So Telegram, Viber, and Facebook Messenger. So let me start with Telegram. Telegram is very, very popular messenger in urban Ukraine right now. In fact, I know it's been widely used right now during the war. Like people tune into Telegram channels and to get the news. And Telegram also offers bots, which is very popular feature in Telegram. And that's one of the reasons why Telegram is so popular, because it automates a lot of manual work and replying to messages. Like I said, even now during the war, people are relying on Telegram a lot. Now, what about security on Telegram? There are two big problems with Telegram. First one is Telegram by default uses a cloud database to exchange messages. Basically, what happens is that it doesn't support end-to-end encryption by default. It means that all the messages you exchange with with the person you communicating is not encrypted. It means that your internet service provider or your maybe like an agency in your country or whoever can snip those messages, right? So that's really bad. Telegram does offer a secret chat, but you have to enable this specifically. So by default, it's not enabled. There are some good alternatives for Telegram. If you just want to message or create groups, chats, you should look for messengers like Signal, Threema, it's a paid messenger from the Switzerland, which is secure, or WhatsApp. WhatsApp has introduced end-to-end encryption for all the chats and messages. So you should look into those 3 instead. The second problem with Telegram is that Telegram developers are also physically located in the Russian Federation. I'm not gonna. I'll let you connect the dots, but needless to say, there is a risk that if developers are working there, then the authorities have access to those developers and their data and their computers. So that's a very big risk. Viber, it's not Russian based, but it's the developers from Viber developers also are located in Russia, and as far as I know, Belarus as well. So it basically inherits the same risks that I just mentioned for Telegram. Facebook Messenger, it's obviously owned by Facebook, but the problem with Facebook Messenger is that its chats are not secured by default. But there is an option to use a secure chat, as you can see in this screenshot. And so if you move that lock to the right, then you will create a secure chat, which is encrypted end-to-end. So I suggest when you create group chat, use this option. A little bit about physical protection. Like I said before, Signal, Threema, there is also a messenger called Wire. 3 of them support PIN. So you can on top of security of your personal device, you can also enable PIN. So if someone gets access to your phone, if it's stolen or lost, they won't be able to access your messenger. So which is a pretty good additional layer of security. Wherever possible, enable automatic destruction of messages. Some messengers call it vanish mode. Signal you can set up for messages to disappear after 8 hours, I believe, by default. So use it if you exchange some sensitive data and you worry about your device being stolen or lost. And then this is like for high security cases. If you worry about like your device being targeted physically, then you should use PIN or password protection instead of Face ID or Touch ID. And you also should enable automatic data destruction after, and like several incorrect PIN and password attempts. Damian, over to you.
Great. So I'm going to talk about password best practices here. Passwords are the keys to the kingdom. Everything, all accounts are secured by password or derivatives of them for the most part. And that's what keeps people out of your accounts. Usernames are often public information, your email address, your first name, last name. There's patterns that companies use, and the password's really the only thing that's protecting it. So it's critical that that passwords are secure. So a best practice is, and we're going to go through these 4 points in a second, but using a separate password for each account. That way, if it's compromised or if it's hacked, someone doesn't have access to all your accounts. We're going to talk about two-factor authentication, which I can't stress enough is extremely important to activate. We're going to talk about just creating secure passwords and then just some password management tools, because obviously we all have many things we're logged into. And if you're going to have passwords that are different from each one, what a logistical nightmare to memorize all of those. And then you're supposed to change them every once in a while. It's unmanageable. So there's tools for that. We can move on. So basically, you need to have separate passwords for accounts. So your LinkedIn account shouldn't be the same as your email, shouldn't be the same as your work password, should not be the same as your Messenger and WhatsApp pins and all those. They need to be different. Should be different from your banking. If a hacker got into your email, and that's the worst one. That one you need to absolutely make sure your email is as secure as possible. They can go into other accounts and reset passwords. They can access your personal information. They might be able to log into your banking. Now, a lot of banking right now has two-factor enabled, so they'll send you a text, or they have within their app to get you to confirm, but still the email is critical. They can also use that to send messages to your contacts to say, hey, here's a file you need to open. Here is some emergency action you need to take that could compromise you. The other thing is, don't share passwords. Each account should have multiple. And also, if you haven't changed your password for many years because everything's working, now is a really good time to change that password. It should be changed when there's issues, when there's heightened alerts, and now is a really good time to do that. Next slide, please. So what is two-factor authentication? So basically what two-factor does is it makes it harder for attackers to gain access to your device because it requires you to take 2 actions. The principle is something that you know and something that you have. So something you know is your password. Something you have is your phone. It's getting less in favor now, but they used to have these little keychains where there was a number that would change every 10 minutes or 2 minutes, and you would have to enter that. But the trend now is moving towards mobile devices. So, Google Microsoft, other providers have authentication apps that you go in and you register vendors into there. And in this example here, you would log into your vendor, let's just say Facebook, for example, and your authentication app would pop up and it would say, you know, this computer in this country at this time is attempting to log into your Facebook account. And you have the option to say yes or no. So right there, if you're not actually logging in and your authentication app pops up and says someone's trying to log into the Facebook and that's not you, you can say no, and you've just blocked that attack. And this is absolutely the best way. You know, I just talked about emails can be used if someone gains access to your email to hack your other accounts. Two-factor authentication also protects against that. They could try to reset the password, but it will, for the most part, ask you to verify that on your two-factor authentication. Obviously, you have to set it up correctly. You need to have redundancy in place and backups in case you lose your phone. But all the vendors have information on that. Next slide, please. You know, here's an example, just very quickly. I'll have links to the other vendors in a second, but here's an example of in Facebook how to activate that. So you would go into the extra security area and you can activate it. You can choose an authentication app. You can see in the middle slide there, it'll give you options on which, you know, Microsoft, Google, I know there's more that they support, or, you know, if you don't have that or if you don't want that, you know, you could always get a text message. So the text message isn't as good as using an authentication app, but if that's all you can do, that's infinitely better than having just a password. Next slide, please. So here's a list of links on how to activate two-factor authentication on different platforms. You know, we'll share this after and the links are there, but, you know, don't worry about some of the super long links. Just go to Google, go to your search engine, type in two-factor authentication, your service, you know, WhatsApp, Microsoft Office, and it'll appear there. Obviously, you know, you need to go to the vendor's site, their help files, but they'll have great instructions, screenshots, and they'll just take you step by step. I know Facebook, for example, has it in many, many different languages. So it's pretty easy to do, and it's a great way to protect your account. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk about strong passwords. You know, you can't rely on two-factor authentication. That's just, you know, one part of the protection layers, but longer passwords are better. I know a while back there was this, you know, and a lot of companies still do this. They have password complexity, but they don't enforce it on long passwords. But there's a school of thought now that people are shifting towards, because you have these computers that can do brute attacks, longer is better. And so you can see here, here's a table, but, you know, if you have numbers only up to 10 characters, it's, you know, it can be instantly cracked. You know, different vendors have different protection in to slow down attackers. You know, after 10 password attempts, the account is locked for half an hour or things like that. But at the end of the day, they're easy to do. So the thought process now is to choose something longer, but obviously you have to balance easy to remember. So the idea is to choose 3 random words that you can easily remember. And then, you know, if you throw a couple punctuations or some numbers in the middle, but don't use Stand with Ukraine. That's a little too timely right now. So if you go to the next slide. So here's some examples of bad passwords. You know, password 01. You know, people know password is bad, so they throw 01 at the end, thinking they're doing something better. They're not. You know, Slava Ukraina, not a good password. Let me in, not a good password. Some sports team, terrible password. Kids' names, people's names in your family, terrible. Stand with Ukraine, not good right now. Here's some examples on the other side of good passwords. So peanut 55 jellyfish. You know, there's some extra punctuation. Nut is capitalized. There's a space between jelly and fish. Most password places, most vendors now allow spaces in passwords. It's a great special character to use. You know, open your favorite book. Go to the second paragraph in the book. Use the first 3 words as your password. Add some punctuation, add some numbers. You know, the next one, the rain in Spain. Doggy hates pickles. great passwords. You can see additional punctuation. You can see some numbers. You can see some capital letters. Next slide, please. So password managers, there's a bunch of tools out there. At a very basic level, your mobile phones do this. They'll have password repositories. I have an Android phone, and when I log in, it asks me if I want to save that password, and then it puts it into the repository. Every time I want to use that password in the repository, I have to credential by fingerprint or by password. If you have passwords you want to share between multiple platforms because you have different tablets, you have a PC, here's some good examples. Some of these are paid, some of these are free. LastPass, Bitwarden, 1Password for families. These are basically tools that keep encrypted copies of passwords that only you have access to, that are shared between multiple devices, and this in hand with having different passwords for every device, for every account is great protection. Obviously, password managers do have a password to get in. That needs to be secure. Many of them also allow for two-factor authentication. So all of these things, you need to use a layered approach to protect yourself. Next slide, please. Okay, Q&A, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Do we have any questions from the audience? No. No questions. All right.
I just saw one just popped up.
Oh, okay.
I can read it out. Thank you. Thoughts on VPN services in general for mobile devices? Another question about VPN. Yeah, you know what? VPN's a great tool, but it doesn't protect you. What it does is it protects information about you. So, VPN basically creates an encrypted pipe, but if you have a VPN set up and you click on a malicious link, it will execute. VPN typically masks your identity. VPN's a great way if you're going around and you don't want to be tracked to utilize it, but it doesn't necessarily scan attachments for viruses. It won't protect you if you take an action that has a negative consequence. Simon, would you have any comments on that?
No, Damian, I think you got it covered. Yeah. In fact, there is a second question. It's about VPN as well. So I think you just answered both of them.
Yeah. I think they're a great idea. They're good to have, but they're just an extra tool. But it's more to protect your data and to protect your identity, and less to protect you from attack.
Okay. I think there is a question. Can a phone be scanned by a third-party device, such as a person nearby you? Damian, do you want to take it?
Yeah, so there is NFC, which and I think Apple has the equivalent for AirDrop. There's a risk there. There's settings in there. I would never. If someone randomly drops you a file, you would, common sense is not to open that unless you know the person. A good practice, I know on my phone, I have NFC turned off, and I only turn it on if I want to use like my Google Pay. I don't leave it running all the time. There's a lot, actually, this is a great question. There's been a lot of stuff in the news about, Apple AirTags and tracking of people. Again, that's more for privacy invasion and tracking of individuals, and for knowing where people are. That's less for phone infection and getting a virus or getting malware, but it is something to be aware of. The easiest thing is to just turn off those features if you don't use them as part of normal day-to-day things. If you need to exchange a business card with someone, it takes 2 seconds to turn it on. You grab what you need. It's a file you're expecting, and you turn it off. That's my recommendation. I typically turn everything off by default unless I want it. I don't leave things running if they're not required for me to perform what I need to do.
Yeah, I also want to add about Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. It's not that it can be used directly to scan you, but so the way it works, let's talk about Wi-Fi as an example. So if you have a Wi-Fi turned on your phone, and then let's say you you go to Starbucks, right? So or Tim Hortons. So your phone tries to automatically connect to that Wi-Fi network on your behalf, because what happens in the background, your phone is constantly looking for networks that it has been connected to before, such as Starbucks or Tim Hortons. So if someone pretends to be Starbucks, and it's very possible if there are easy free tools that unfortunately are used by cyber criminals to target individuals, and so they can just impersonate Starbucks or Tim Hortons Wi-Fi hotspot, and so your phone will connect to that fake hotspot, right? And then basically you'll start it can even provide access to internet, like how you would normally go to internet through those hotspots. But what happens and why it's bad, because the traffic which goes through that rogue access point can sniff your traffic. And if something is not encrypted, then basically that that communication is in a clear text for a cyber criminal. So that's
actually a great use case of where VPN would be useful.
Right.
If you're collecting to access points and you have a VPN pipe, that VPN, that's a great example of where VPN would help.
Yeah. So what Damian said, if you don't use Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, just turn it off. Excuse me. I know it's convenient to have it turned on, but if you really worried about your cyber protection, if let's say you're an activist or journalist, or you do something which you understand you can be a target, then you have to be extra diligent and protect yourself. So don't try not to use Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, especially if you're not in a safe place, physically protected place.
Yeah, one thing, just on that topic, I'll just quickly, a common attack is, you go to an airport and the airport has free internet and you set up a rogue access point with the same name. And then, yeah, you could sniff traffic, or you say it's for free, just log in with your Facebook account to gain access, and now they've gotten your credentials.
Right.
Just notice I have one typed question. Their hand also, so I'll just read out the type question. Can you suggest how we should support our parents and grandparents who are not computer literate to be safe online? Yeah, that's a good question. Obviously this information here is valuable, but I guess to summarize that, we're going to share it, but it would be going and seeing them and activating some of these features if they're not safe doing it. Helping them activate those features. And I would say the top thing to do is to make sure that they don't trust links, and don't trust just because someone says who they are, they actually are that. There's a lot of people out there, and it's great, that are adopting technology, but they're not necessarily aware of all the settings, and they use a lot of default settings. But going and seeing your grandparents, or trying to do a Zoom call where you can walk them through it is an excellent way of getting them protected too.
All right. Any more questions?
I see someone that activated their hand in the attendees. Their hand up. I don't know if we have the ability to pull them in. Maybe they can just post their question.
I don't think I have this ability, so that's probably like a tech person, but I think the best way is to just maybe take it offline. So I know that person who raised their hand, so I'll give you a call so I can answer your question if that's okay. And we'll include we'll make this video available on YouTube, and we'll send a PDF to all the people registered with those links and some of this information which we discussed today. And it's going to be good for those parents and grandparents who are not very tech savvy. Just maybe show them this PDF file and maybe sit with them, or help them go through this document so they can understand some of it, and hopefully you can help them enable those security features. Yeah, I see that there is some conversation in the chat, so that's great. So thanks, thank you to our volunteers too for answering those questions in the chat in the meantime. All right, so yeah, we'll send an email out to everyone who registered for this webinar, and if there is more questions, you can reach out to Damian and myself offline. So we'll include our contact information to that PDF file. All right. Yeah, from my side, I just want to thank you, everyone who participated in this webinar. So I hope you learned something valuable and useful today, and I hope you'll become more secure, when it comes to your personal devices. Yeah, Damian, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, no, thanks for everyone for participating. And, these attacks occur constantly, but right now there's heightened awareness and scrutiny, and absolutely the Ukrainian community is specifically being targeted now by these bad actors, and especially state-funded ones. And we know who those states are. Normally, they're targeting other areas of interest, but right now we're being targeted. So it's very wise to take these precautionary actions.
All right. Thanks everyone, and Slava Ukraini.